When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody, we're back, and this is episode 110, Day in the Life of a Web Developer. I'm Matt, that's Mike, and this week we'll be discussing Mike's typical day. And then for our web news, we'll be talking about reseller hosting and recurring income specifically. Now, if that sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and do that. Check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us on our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And now it's time for our weekly pain points. So, Mike, sir, please take it away.
All right. Weekly pain point this week was VS Code being slow. So I think it's like a thing with every big application that becomes super popular. It's always going to get to the point where eventually it becomes over-engineered. Too many extensions get added to it. You know, it just becomes too functional almost, to the point where it's inherently slow because it's doing so many things for you in the background. Now, this time, I've kind of optimized it a little bit. I've made it so that not all my extensions are on all the time, because I had like extensions for Java, which I enabled a long time ago, running at all times. I had a bunch of other extensions on that didn't need to be on, so I kind of limited that. I also switched back from the Insiders Edition, which is the one that was pretty much updated daily, to back to like the stable edition. And that seemed to help as well. I was on the Insider Edition because they have this thing called Settings Sync built in to the Insider Edition, which means that if I go on my like MacBook Pro, I'll have the exact same extensions and settings because it syncs to my GitHub account. But there's an extension for that, and it works pretty well. I actually like the extension better than the built-in feature. So I was like, screw it, I'm just going to go back to the stable edition so I don't have to worry about updating VS Code every day, and I can get some better speed, stability, and all that back into my routine. So that's what I was doing last week. What about you, Matt?
So this week, my weekly pain point is that Mike wanted, quote, a beefy web news. So like last minute, we were talking here, just doing a little catch up, and he said he wanted a, quote, beefy web news. So I had to go digging into Trello, and it's not really a weekly pain point because we end up finding a web news within a few moments, but I don't have another weekly pain point all at the ready. I've been going ham into some social media stuff as well as finishing up some projects for some clients. So that's my weekly pain point. Mike, please ask for web news earlier. I don't know. I have no feedback specifically. It's literally, he said it while I was writing my weekly pain point, and I didn't have one, so I just wrote what he said.
Just don't like the beefy.
Campbell's chunky all the way,
keep saying
bud.
it to you. You're going to need to get me a beefy topic next week. Nice beefy topic for the podcast.
We're going to call the episode Campbell's Chunky Web Developer Soup.
I love Campbell's Chunky Soup. I haven't had it in a long time.
I don't enjoy soup.
I know, you hate soup, which is crazy to me. I love soup.
It's
Let
because
us know in our socials if you like soup or not. Go at HTML Everything on Twitter, HTML All Things. Just DM us, contact us, post at us. What's your stance on soup? We want to hear your soup. We want to hear how much you like soup.
The problem with soup is, okay, here goes. If I'm served it, so if I'm at like a formal event and I'm served it, I'll eat it. Like, it's not like I'm like, I hate every type of soup, but I ain't going to order it. And the reason why that is because when I had my wisdom teeth out, it was like a week or a week and a half of just soup. And the amount of like vegetable, chicken noodle, and then like chicken and cheese or something that I had in a week for breakfast, by the way, was horrible. Like 3 meals a day, all just soup. So I'm done.
For me, that sounds good. I love ramen. That's kind of a soup, but it's more noodles than soup, I guess. But still,
ramen is good. I've been out with you for that. That is good. Because you're like, well, I mean, the one we went to like a couple years ago or something was more like there was solid food like big shrimp and stuff like that in the soup, and you had to like eat it, and then the soup was like steeped in all this solid food you were eating, and then you drink the soup at the end. That was pretty good. I like that. Like I said, like if I'm served a good soup, I'll eat it. But I'm not one to order soup.
You're not going to seek out soup. I gotcha. Yeah, and ramen's more like a noodle dish than a soup dish anyway. It's like it has less liquid than regular soup. So yeah, fair enough. All right, let's get right into it here. So today's episode is about me and what my routine is. I've been wanting to do this episode for a while, but I wanted to kind of lock down a good routine before I did it. And I think I'm there. Obviously, the routine is going to be varying day to day. I'll try to talk about the variances, but just know that it's not exactly the same every day. But I do have a general rubric that I like to follow. So that's where I'm going to go with. So segment number 1 is morning routine. In the morning, I like to start off the day with not work. I like to kind of slowly get into work. So the first thing I do is I make coffee. I make coffee kind of slowly. I don't have a machine or anything like that. I have a French press, so it takes certain amount of time to grind the coffee, boil the water, steep it for 4 minutes or whatever, how much time, then pour it. Like that whole thing is kind of like a habitual process now that I do. And while I'm doing that, I'm usually listening to a podcast. Before it was a little bit like I would listen to the news, but then the news got too depressing, so I started to listen to like just random non-tech related stuff, something that's completely unrelated from the work that I'm going to be doing that day. So I kind of try to separate out my morning from my actual work. That's my goal for that. And once I finish that, once I have my coffee, once I sit down, turn on my computer, I'll start with also non-work related stuff on the computer. So I go with going email, like checking my personal emails, going to news sites, making sure that all my bills are paid, like literally like just small tasks that I need to do throughout the day, or that I would usually have done throughout the day. I just kind of get my personal stuff done in the morning. Now this process doesn't take very long. I'd say my morning routine before I start work is probably like a half hour, maybe 20 minutes to a half hour. But I find that it kind of gets me set up where I'm not I don't want to check social media anymore. I don't need to see the news. So it's not on the back of my mind. Once I'm done all that, I can kind of focus and get work done. So that's my goal with that little morning routine. So the first work related task that I do is to-do list management. So I open up my to-do list, and my Jira board. So I open up both and I kind of go through and figure out what I'm doing that day. So I'll see what tasks I didn't finish the day before. I'll add tasks that need to be done for that day. I'll add my, meeting tasks that I need to do. So prep for meetings, like stuff like that. So I add all the stuff to my to-do list that I need to do. I don't go too granular usually, but I'll at least over the overarching things I will add onto there so I can keep track of it. Especially when it's like a crunch time, especially when there's just a lot to do. If there's like only a few tasks, sometimes I'll skip the to-do list management in general. But lately it's been kind of overwhelming. So I'm trying to kind of get into that to-do list at least once, twice a day in that sense so that I can keep track and I don't forget, because I've noticed that if I don't do that and I'm overwhelmed, I tend to forget some pretty important tasks. And then in a meeting or a stand-up, people will be like, well, what's the status of this? And I'll be like, oh, I forgot it. And that kind of sucks. So I try to alleviate that with a to-do list. Once I'm done that, then I'll actually get into some deep work. So I've mentioned this before multiple times on the podcast, but my deep work hours are usually morning. So anywhere between 9 a.m. to like 1 p.m., I can get a lot of work done and I can get the more complex stuff done. And this, to get to that point, it took me a little while to figure out where I'm most effective and what kind of tasks I need to do during that time. But now what I do is I start with pretty complex things. And the reason for that is usually if I start with a complex task and get it done, I'll feel pretty accomplished. And then I can get done the smaller tasks as I go throughout the day. But not only that, when I'm like off work, when I'm doing something else and I have a complex thing on the top of my head, I'll try to solve it. And the first thing I want to do is get that solution on paper or, on the actual code and get it over with, because it's always in the back of my mind and I need to get it out of there if it's something complex. So I start with a complex thing, get that done, and then move on to the smaller tasks that are on my to-do list or just stuff that's been piling up, and try to get as much done in that amount of time as possible. And again, that time frame is anywhere between 9 a.m. till around 12 or 1 p.m. And that kind of leads perfectly into the segment number 2, which is afternoon.
Well, I'll actually jump in here and say that your morning is much more organized than mine. Now, I usually start later in the day, so I mean, you can like shift me down a time slot, if you will. But effectively, I kind of wake up, check all my like communications, like check all my emails and stuff like that, and see if there's anything that needs to be done right away. If something needs to be done right away, I like just immediately sort of, because I'm still in bed when I check my email, so I'll like hop out of bed and then just go and do whatever it is needs to be done, or like immediately make some calls, do whatever. But in general, what I try to do is I try to do all my meetings before I jump into something, because I hate jumping into something big and then being stuck in the status of I was, deep into troubleshooting or deep into just doing something, and then having to be like, oh, like someone from an unrelated project is calling, or someone from the same project is calling about something unrelated, or just asking even about what I'm doing, and that kind of throws me off. So my sort of deep work hours, if we're taking it in that way, so like my sort of deep work hours, I was going to mention this in segment 3, but I'll mention it now because as you talked about is it's more in your segment 3, which is end of the day. Like I do it more at night, in the evening, or like sometimes my deep work will be after I do stuff. So I'll like work a bit, during the day, whatever, work in the afternoon, and then I'll either sometimes work straight through depending on how busy we are, or I will take a break and do something, play a game, watch a movie, go out, whatever, and then I will come back and do like a deep work session into the night, which is why sometimes you'll get like a message from me at like 5 a.m. But the reason why I do that is like it is strategic, is because I find that I am too distracted by constant messages, and like I want to answer most of my messages. Like a lot of my messages are personal messages, and I do want to answer them. And so when I'm in between calls and stuff like that, I can easily jump around, do that type of stuff. I can easily schedule all my social media stuff or whatever when I'm in that afternoon sort of working session, or my morning, I guess, sort of working session. And then I'm able to, at night, no one's around, there's no like breaking news generally pouring in, and I'm not really a news guy anyway, so I don't really like look that stuff up anyway, and I'm not getting sent news articles. That's usually how I get my news, is people send me stuff. So I more or less get curated news from people. So I don't really get any of that because everyone's asleep, and then I'm able to just go in and just do something for a good 4 or 5 hours, 2-3 hours, whatever it is, depending on what it is. And I just end up banging it out. Like last week, Mike was on stream, and like, yeah, I was chatting and stuff like that, but because it was just the stream, and like most people weren't around, just the stream and just me doing stuff, I finished the entire front banner of the Webflow thing, which I just shared on Instagram actually. So it's that's just sort of how I deal with it, and it took me a while also to figure that out. And it's probably also why, realizing years later, probably also why I would frequent doing homework later at night, because I'm better without all those distractions, and I'm very much the person that, like, if we're talking about somebody in the early 2000s, I'm very much the person that gets distracted by the red blinking light of a BlackBerry. I want to answer that message. I want to answer that call. I want to answer whatever. So when that's removed, I'm able to just sit down and go like, hey, I'm going to be bothered by X task. That's usually how I prioritize it. I'm going to be bothered by X task, and it's going to ruin my sleep, or I'm not going to get as good a sleep unless I finish this. So I'm going to finish this right frickin' now, and so that I'm actually tired, and then I'm going to go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. And, like my reasoning for doing stuff in the morning is exactly the same as your reasoning for doing it at night, because my main development tasks are associated with a company that's in California. So it's a 3-hour difference in time zone, 3 hours ahead of us. So they wake up later on for me. So therefore, when I'm in the morning time, I don't have any distractions in terms of work communications. Obviously, in other communications and stuff like that, I have to just turn off and deal with. But in terms of work related, like meetings and stuff like that, it's all scheduled for after lunch in the afternoon session. So that's why I go to the morning. And again, the differences here is like I'm more of a morning person than you are, so we kind of my schedule is adjusted for that. But that's really important. Like this stuff is really important to figure out, and this stuff is what really makes working from home or having your own business or being able to set your own hours be a really key thing in a job. Like if I'm looking for a job at this point, it's really important for me to be able to actually set my own hours, even though my hours are pretty typical, because I need to be able to work around those working sessions, those deep work sessions. Otherwise, I'm not going to be as effective. And the same thing with you, Matt. If you weren't able to set your own hours, you would be a lot less effective. You would have to be wake up early in the morning, be groggy, or get used to it, obviously, but still be groggy. Like if you're not a morning person, you're never going to get you're never going to be a happy person to wake up in the morning. You might get used to it and you might be able to adapt, but you're never going to be happy. And therefore, you're not going to be as effective as you can be if you can just set your own hours and work the same amount of time and the same amount of effectiveness.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Is like half of the dread of when I have to wake up early is obviously the fact that I'm not going to get much sleep, but then also is the fact that I don't want to be awake at that time. So yeah, like most definitely, I've never been that person, I guess. Like, hindsight's kind of 2020 now. If you think about like all the weird stuff I used to do in school, where I would like start math homework later or whatever, the more complex homework is due to stuff like this. And obviously, I was not aware of that before because you're kind of stuck in the school schedule, whether it be college or high school or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you kind of are who you are, I suppose. Now, maybe there's ways to adapt even more, who knows, but like, you're right. Like, I still wouldn't enjoy the morning. Like, some people are fans of like the morning dew and stuff and they go for a run or something, whereas I'm like, I don't want to go out there right now, so I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice that we can set our own hours. So with that, we're moving on to the afternoon segment number 2. If you haven't noticed, I didn't eat breakfast in the morning. I usually eat breakfast in the afternoon at around 11 a.m. So it's like a pre-afternoon breakfast. I do that because I'm on the intermittent fasting schedule. Whatever the numbers are, I don't know, but I don't. 8:16, something like that. I eat from 11 a.m. to like 7 p.m. and I don't eat any time before or after that. So that seemed to be working for me. Like, it's a good way for me to maintain my weight. It's a good way for me to not snack at night, stuff like that. Like, it's nothing crazy. It's not revolutionary or anything like that. Like, it doesn't make me lose 100 pounds. But it's enough for me to have some sort of structure to my diet. And that's enough. Like, I don't do calorie counting. I don't do any of that. I do work out and stuff like that here and there, but I'm not on a strict schedule or anything. But I do keep my eating hours between 11 and 7 as much as possible. Obviously, there is some exceptions. I'm not super rigid on it. But anyway, this isn't a health podcast. So I'm not going to talk here about that. But yeah, I'll start my afternoon with an 11 a.m. breakfast. And usually that'll be like a half hour. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my prep work for calls, usually, because my calls start in the range of around 12 to 1 p.m., depending on the day, depending on who I need to speak to and stuff like that. And so if I don't have any prep work for calls, then I'll just continue my deep work, whatever task that I'm on. Usually by that time, it'll probably be like either finishing something off that's complicated or doing some more simple tasks, so I'm able to bang out a few things in an hour or so. But as soon as that's done, I'll be jumping on calls. So I have a stand up every day at 1 p.m. my time, which is Eastern. And that stand up is kind of the most important call of the day because it sets the tone for whatever's going to come next. It's with the whole team. We have to all go through it, see what the blockers are, stuff like that. It's a general basic stand up. It's not long. It's like a maximum of half an hour. Sometimes we get it done in 15 minutes. Stuff like that. It's nothing crazy, but it's a really important call because, again, everyone can call out what they did the previous day and what they need to do that day and whatever they need from anyone else on the team. And because I'm the tech lead on that team, that means that most of the stuff that they need are from me if it's a development related task. So I need to know how I'm going to schedule the rest of my day based on that call. After that call, that's when kind of the collaborative work starts. That's when I'm going to be going and figuring out which meetings I need to do, which deep dives I need to do with programmers, what pair programming I'm going to need to do. Is there any code reviews for pull requests that I need to finish? Are there any questions that are still unanswered that I need to kind of follow up on? Stuff like that. That's where the next part of my day lies in. And that could take anywhere between like 2 or 3 hours. Obviously, again, this is where the variance comes in. Sometimes it's a really basic stand-up. It's like 10 minutes. No one has any questions. And then I go right back into doing my deep work. But most of the time, there's usually some follow-up, at least with a worst case scenario of it being like 3 hours of constant meetings. What I try to do to break those meetings up is after each meeting, I'll try to at least stand up, go on the balcony, take a breath of fresh air, because I'm not like, I wouldn't say that I stress over meetings, but for me, when I'm meeting with a bunch of new people, it's always going to be a little bit of a higher stress than if I'm just on my own, doing my own thing. So it does kind of cloud my mind. It does kind of make me more tired and less effective as I go on throughout the day. So that's why I need to get a lot of work done before my meetings, because after my meetings, I'm usually pretty tired and I'm not going to be able to do any of that heavy work, at least until I take a break. And with that, the end of the afternoon kind of goes back to me checking the to-do list to make sure that there's no severe outstanding stuff, to add anything as well that has come up throughout the day. So if there's, like, for instance, an issue that myself and a developer couldn't resolve during the working session or during a question, or I just didn't have enough time, I'll add that to the to-do list for the next day or for the next few hours if I'm around and stuff like that. So that kind of ends the afternoon portion, the middle portion of the day, and goes on to the end of the day portion, segment number 3. So with that, segment number 3 is the kind of the end of the day. So I don't do too many like intensive tasks here. What I start with is I'll usually try to figure out if there's anyone I need to touch base with that, you know, maybe I missed in the afternoon because there was other more important stuff. Is there anyone out there that like just needs that one extra push to get like an assignment done? Am I blocking anyone from getting their tasks done? Do I need to, you know, commit my changes in one branch to push it so that people can pull in from my branch to do pull requests, stuff like that, like administrative programming work, but not like any serious tasks that usually need to be done. Like, obviously, again, this varies based on if it's crunch time or not. Like, if we need to get work done, everything kind of goes out the window and I just sit there and work. But again, if I get all that done, I'll do a final check of my to-do list, make sure that everything's been done that needs to be done that day. I'll check stuff off. I'll write notes. I'll kind of go into email mode. So if there's anything that I need that people haven't followed up with me on, I'll send out emails. There's no point in kind of calling at that point because it's usually around 5 or 6 p.m. I don't want to bother people at the very end of their day unless it's an emergency. So I'll just send out an email to the people that I need to get more information from, and I'll leave it for the next day to see where they get there and stuff like that. And again, this kind of varies drastically during crunch time. So in a crunch time setting, I'll do similar setup for the end of the day, but what will change is like I'll finish the day, I'll go have dinner, I'll do my workout, I'll hang out with my wife for a bit, and then usually at around 8 p.m. I'll sit back down to do another working session. And usually this working session is another deep work session where I'll just put on some music or something and I'll just work for another 1 to 3 hours or until like I can't work anymore, essentially, because I'm not an evening person. I can get some work done in the evening if I have to, but I'm not an evening person. So if I, at some point during that evening, I'm going to start trailing off and I'll start like putting commas in the wrong places, putting like brackets in the wrong places. Like it'll be a very obvious degradation of my programming abilities. And at that point, I'm like, okay, well, there's no point in continuing. I'm just wasting time at this point. It's worse for me to keep going because I'm probably going to write bad code. I'm going to make it so the application actually works worse than if I were to just come back fresh in the morning.
So what would you say, I was going to ask you a question here. So like, how does this entire schedule vary when you have crunch time? Is it all just forced deep work? Is there still calls? Like is there more calls? Like how do you handle this?
So that's a good question. So with the deep work, so if it's crunch time and I have to get tasks done, like I have to get programming tasks done, I'm not the one managing tasks, then it is less calls. I'll do the stand-up. And then I'll specifically say on the stand-up, hey, like I need to get, task A, B, and C done. I don't have time today to support. So unless you guys have any emergency stuff that I need to support right now, this is the time to ask. And then I'll extend the stand-up by like 10 or 15 minutes, but that's it. And after that, it'll be like literally no communication with the outside team unless I have some questions. And like it's the strict like me sitting down and just working policy. So less meetings, usually less task manage, like less to-do list management. Is just me just going and working on either a one complex problem or many interwoven problems that need to get done in sequential order. That's really the only thing that changes. Sometimes the crunch is actually me having to do more meetings because it's a crunch, but it's me having to figure out what features need to be added, for instance. So I need to gather requirements better. So I need to talk to more people to get the requirements down and get the the set of tasks that I need to do down. Because like right now, for instance, we're coding a pretty complex application that needs to kind of support many different use cases and has to have like a million different configuration settings, because like one store might be different from another store and stuff like that. So I'm in the process of kind of getting those requirements down and getting those configuration settings down. So it is a lot of meetings, and it is kind of a crunch because we need to get it out as soon as possible. So I'm trying to organize meetings around those requirements, and I'm trying to minimize the amount of time that I'm supporting development, because it's not as important due to the fact that if we develop something right now, it could change in the next meeting. So I try to balance between doing the development and actually getting the correct requirements, because that's the important part.
So then it sounds like your crunch time is less of a rigid schedule. How rigid would your schedule be? How rigid to the plan that you just laid out when you're not in crunch? Like, how are you specifically being like, 8 p.m., do you have like an alarm set, like 8 p.m. better sit back down? I don't have any.
So this is an average thing. I don't have any rigidity to my schedule other than a few things like when I eat. Even when I wake up isn't super rigid. It's somewhere between like 7:30 and 8 just naturally. Like I don't really follow any alarms or anything like that. I don't like rigidity too much because it just makes the days too boring. This is, again, the stuff that I just said is kind of an average of what happens each day. I don't put an alarm on 11 a.m. and be like, or like 10 a.m. and be like, okay, now I need to take a sip of my coffee or something like that. Or now I need to stand up and go, walk around. I don't do that. When I naturally feel that I'm tired, I'll stand up and walk around, go outside, get another coffee or something like that. So I try to keep it as ad hoc as possible, but it turns out I've been kind of monitoring it over the past few weeks, and there is some sort of average to it where it's like, this is an average day of my life.
What do you mean by ad hoc in terms of a schedule? Like,
ad hoc means like I won't be rigid. So I won't follow a strict schedule. So I'll just change it up if I need to. Right.
You don't have like a task list that's all has timers and you're like, drink coffee.
No, I don't have a task list of timers. Yeah, not at all.
Okay.
I don't have a stopwatch being like timing how long I'm coding for and stuff like that. I don't like that. That's too much for me. I know some people can benefit from something like that, but for me, it's just like my natural rhythm keeps me in check enough where I don't need to follow a strict timeline.
And even with that, like I said before, you're a lot stricter than me. Like I very much jump around. Like you're right in that there's some things that just fall into place. Like I always check my emails and calls and stuff like that when I wake up to see if I miss any calls or whether there's a call that needs to happen or whatever. If I need to schedule some calls, I always schedule them in the afternoon because like that's just what I do. Because then if you interrupt me scheduling a social media post or like editing the podcast, it's not like that's deep work necessarily. It's just like, I'm back to hour mark 110 or something. I can just keep editing. So that type of stuff, like if you interrupt me there, I don't really care. A lot of the time I will ignore like a bunch of that type of stuff. And then I jump around a lot, so I use Microsoft To Do, like I've signed in with my enterprise account, whatever, and I use that to track things. Like a lot of the clients I deal with are very they like to bounce ideas, so they'll bounce an idea off me, and then I'll just jot down everything they say for the most part in tasks, or I'll just jot it all down into one task, and then later I'll break it up into tasks, just to whichever is more expedient for the type of call, because sometimes they're in a hurry or whatever. And then basically I'll just sort of chip away at stuff. So like right now we got a couple things that are due, but a couple things that are waiting. So I'll like today or like last week, I kept being interrupted by random phone calls and stuff like that. So because of that, there's that like part of the non-rigidity. So instead of me just saying, okay, I'm not gonna do call, I just said, okay, whatever. And I just sort of did a deep dive, as Mike and I had discussed before this, into a bunch of like how social media specs work and like what's the best time to post and stuff like that. Like I did sort of as deep a dive as you can get in a couple of days, but I went in and sort of researched that because I was consistently being called and there were little things happening, and like we have this big project that needs to constantly be resubmitted. So like we were doing that. And so a lot of the stuff isn't necessarily like deeply technical, if you will. And then this kind of frees me up so that like, I mean, on the, like it was a long weekend here in Canada. So like on the long weekend, we had like an outage in one of our data centers. So it's like, I kind of like dealing with that on the side and stuff like that. So I'm not being like super rigid. in that, this is my weekend time, or like this is my no call time or whatever. Although I think maybe we need to a little bit to maybe get more Twitch streams up, for example, because obviously I can't be taking a call every 5 minutes in a Twitch stream. So that's like one thing that may become more rigid. But the point of the matter is, like, I prefer like an organized chaos, if that makes sense, where I might not, like, there's been weeks where I just won't even touch CSS, and it's all social media, or it's all fixing up of stuff, or it's all calling people, or it's all working on old projects, or reorganizing like a little bit of server stuff. But then there'll be weeks where I have to deep dive into like random like government regulation, let's say, and I'll be doing calls and stuff like that about government regulation and stuff. Or I'll be, depending on the project, of course, I don't just read regulation for fun, to be clear. and then I'll have other weeks where I'll be all Webflow all the time, and then other weeks where I'll be all, not necessarily, and when I say all, I mean like in my deep work time usually. So I'll be like all tutorial all the time, or I'll be looking for people to have a conversation with. Like I'll be looking for people to. There we go. There's one of my schedule things. I just had a panic attack. I just thought we missed an interview that we had scheduled, but it's next week, so that's good. You see how non-rigid my schedule is? I just realized, I was like, wait a second, are we supposed to have an interview today? No, that is next week. So thankfully, thank you to Microsoft Calendar for the. That's how non-rigid my schedule is. But anyway, but yeah, so when something rigid like that happens, when you have to like schedule a date, it becomes like a big thing for me. But regardless of which, like, that's just how I prefer to work. I don't know whether it stems from IT. You're kind of all over the place. One day you're imaging computers, the next day you're fixing like a mouse or something, the next day you're in the networking closet rerouting cables, the next day you're at your computer all day, the next time you're writing documentation. You're all over the place all the time, and that's sort of what I found to be better than just constantly doing something. I worked in a factory for a long time in which I effectively poked muffins for a living. That's not a joke. So I would, like, that got very boring. But then when they moved me to a job where I was doing like more random stuff or active stuff, like manage this and move this stuff over here and do this and do your paperwork, it was a lot better for me, because I thrive better in an environment where I have to like jump around a little bit and have like a bit of like, it's not like, oh, it's 4 p.m. better go get the old like car out or something. I prefer a non-rigid environment in general. So I think you're right in that it's, well, I don't know if you said this, but I guess I'll say it now. So like it's in my opinion, for the type of person I am, it's healthier to have a sort of chaotic schedule, but just have sort of procedures in place. So when someone asks for a call, I do it this way. When someone asks for this, I do it this way. When someone wants an email, I do it this way. And that's just how I handle it. I just find that to be a lot better, a lot smoother, and everything goes just a lot easier, which really helps with that type of thing. But I think that really concludes sort of the day in the life. I don't know whether you want to add anything else to that, Mike. We can jump in the old web news if you'd like.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well there at the end. I think the main point that you brought up and that you solidified is that everyone's day in the life would be different, and it's important to follow your own signs of what you think would be the most effective way of handling that day. But it's also good to hear different ways, because what I did was like I took a bunch of advice from a bunch of different sources and tried to make my own like schedule, or tried to make my own way of doing it. And the other thing is that I'm constantly changing it. So I'm constantly kind of adjusting it and making it so that it's not boring for me, or that I actually enjoy it, stuff like that. So it's an ever-evolving process. This is, again, just one average day in the life. There's a lot of variances. There's a lot of other things that could happen, but it's kind of cool I was tracking it a little bit, journaling it a little bit, and it was cool to see how actually consistent it is, although I don't have it planned consistently.
I think that's actually a really good critical point you brought up, is that you took pieces of information from various guides. If you read a productivity guide, or like this is how I became a programmer, and 6-month guide and stuff like that, I'm sure there's a bunch of really good information in there, and I'm sure it's a bunch of really good stuff. But I was actually having a conversation with a friend yesterday where I was saying, where we we as entrepreneurs, or we as people who want to be productive, so whether you're just a developer or you're an aspiring developer looking to just to get a job, or whether you're an entrepreneur that wants to go into freelancing or start your own web agency or whatever, we all sort of read these guides or these Bibles, as they're sometimes referred to, where it's like a billionaire, let's say, if you're in the business space, and it's a billionaire that says, this is how I got here. Or like a web dev is like, I was hired in 6 months, follow these exact steps exactly. And you know what? Those steps that either the billionaire or like the entrepreneur in that case, or the developer in that case, they might be steps that work for you, and they might work for a whole bunch of people. But I do think it's important to realize that, and we said this before, is like, we are not machines. And it's important to also notice that being a billionaire has an aspect of luck to it. And I think that applies in a smaller scale in terms of money, because we're not all billionaires. I think that applies in a sense here as well. Like, you got lucky. If you're in a field that you really enjoy, you're lucky that you have that job, or you're lucky that you found your thing that you enjoy. Whereas some people just sort of like, oh, I'm an accountant and I really don't like math, but I'm an accountant because it was a good job and I can work in multiple places, so I can be steady, or I can have steady work. I'm an accountant. And so, if you love being an accountant, power to you. But there's some people that just absolutely, will not enjoy it, but will still do it. And so what I'm getting at is that, yes, read those articles, yes, read all that stuff, but keep in mind your human element. If you took another billionaire or another developer that got there in 6 months, their steps would be different. That other billionaire steps would be different. Mark Zuckerberg runs things differently than Bill Gates did, and he runs things differently than Satya Nadella did, and everything else. And the point is like, they probably took advice from mentors. Like, a bunch of these guys always mention mentors and stuff like that in these articles that you read, but they take the mentor's advice and then apply it in their own way. And that's how they come up with their own unique formula. There's a reason why not all of us can just follow the exact, education, life experience, whatever path of choose a billionaire and become that same person. It's because everyone has their own unique flavor. It depends on where you live, what you're doing, some luck, who's around you, what contacts you have, whatever, right? And so I know that that's going outside of the realm of getting, or like a day in the life, but I just feel as though some people will try to structure themselves as their favorite influencer, whether that's us or whether that's someone else on Medium or someone on YouTube or whatever it is, and that's not going to work for you most likely. But some of it will. Like, them saying you need to study more and that they study for 8 hours a day starting at 9 a.m., maybe you do need to study more, but maybe you absorb information faster and can do it in 6 hours starting at 10 p.m. But some people will try to be rigid, and maybe that will work for them, but it won't work for others. And so I just really wanted to draw attention to that these guides can get you stuck in a rut where you're constantly trying to follow their advice to the letter, but they can also make you depressed about your own situation because you're not doing exactly what they're doing. You're not hitting the same milestones as fast as these other people did. When in reality, if you changed it up a bit to your own flavor, then you're good to go. Some people need the exact structure that they're set out to do. If they read the article, they're like, yep, that sounds like me, and they do it, power to them. But there's going to be a lot of people that can take bits and pieces, but not all of it, and still succeed or even do better. So just something to keep in mind when you're sort of reading through the sea of advice and influencer stuff, and even this podcast. Take what you value and apply it the way you would. And if you're really lost, maybe apply it like us if you take the advice from us. But then you might be like, man, I really hate how this is always 8 hours straight. Maybe you want to do 4 hours, take a break, and then do another 4 hours. Give it a go. Every company and every person is different. So just a bit of a tangent, or related tangent, I suppose, but something I thought I would touch on. But we'll jump right in here then to the web news. So this week, the web news is reseller hosting and recurring income. So reseller hosting seems like an easy way to make money for web developers. So if you don't know, you basically approach a larger hosting company, HostGator, or Web Hosting Canada, or whoever. You approach one of those guys and you buy a reseller account, and they basically rent you a section of their server, and you can get there's some where it's like VPS or shared hosting or whatever. Like, you choose a tier. We're not going to get into the weeds of the tiers and stuff. So you choose a tier to resell, and then you resell that space, hopefully at a profit. So, this can be a great opportunity, straight up, for web developers if they have a bunch of clients that need their projects. So let's say you build their projects, and then they need that hosting account. They need that hosting from you. That's a great way to make money. However, there's a lot of people that, they have hosting already. They just want you to update their site. They don't want to do a migration. Their email's usually tied in there, so they're scared of losing their email. A lot of guys still use email. A lot of people still use email, so it's very much a fear to move email, especially if you're actually moving the mailbox itself, so they can actually lose data at that point. So they're not even just missing messages during the migration if there is any missed messages, but they can also actually get messages lost, depending on if they're stored in the cloud or stored in their computer or whatever. And so it's a whole sort of big thing. If you've ever done an email migration, you know this. So back to the reseller thing. So a lot of people, right, who sometimes aren't even technical, they just think, oh, reseller hosting's great. I'll rent a space from this person. I'll sell it at like a profit. But they don't really realize that you're effectively, sort of in a, I wrote niche here, but maybe it's not a niche, but you're sort of in a space where you need to really sort of dive in and actually run it like a business. You need to market the fact that you have space available. You need to be priced competitively. You need to offer something that other people do not, or offer something that people prefer, whether it be better prices or better support or better whatever. And you need to offer that type of stuff if you're trying to rent it out to people in the public. People aren't just going to be like, oh, this guy is a reseller now, I'll go to him. Because why wouldn't he go to the person that you're reselling from, unless you're that client? So web developers, like I said, already have an in, and that's really great. But the people who are looking at just renting space out, I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that are successful at doing it, but I'm also sure, and if I'm wrong, please hit us up in some sort of social media to let us know how you did it. I'm also sure that they put in the elbow grease. They did some sort of Instagram ad marketing or something, or Facebook marketing, or they word of mouth, or they had an in with a developer that didn't want to handle servers, or they had an in with something, or they bought a hosting company or something like that. There's definitely a way that they did it, and it wasn't just, oh, they rented a space out and then everyone came clamoring for their hosting accounts that are marked up, by the way, from the guy you're renting it from, to an extent, of course, right? So anyway, if you really think about it, this is very similar to referral or affiliate programs from other businesses, where you can become an affiliate or whatever they call it with Amazon, where if somebody clicks your link, then you get a kickback if the person that clicked your link buys the thing. That's really great and that's really awesome. But the point of Amazon doing that is because they're hoping that you as an affiliate will go and market it out. And you need to actually market that product. You can't just be like, hey guys, I have a camera link. Can you guys just use this instead? That might work if you're on a podcast like this, or if you're on something where the work's been effectively put in, if you're on an influential podcast or an influential Facebook page or something, and you can say, hey guys, this camera's on sale. And so you did the research, your people want cameras, and you put this camera on sale. People might buy stuff from that link, but there's all that work put in behind it. That's the main thing. The business in those cases is they're an influencer of some sort, whether it be a podcast or a Facebook page or whatever it is. The work's been done there. And I feel as though people just think they can jump into the affiliate game and be like, yeah, people are just going to buy from this link. Why the hell would I buy from your link when I can just type in the same name into my app where I'm already signed in, and maybe I'm not even signed in on my computer, I just always order stuff from my app? That's a very normal situation to be in. Some people don't have computers. Why would I click your link when I could just go into my app and look up the exact same thing, which Amazon may have already suggested to me, by the way, because they're pretty good at doing that. So the point is, reseller hosting and recurring income in general, like affiliate programs and whatever, are great revenue sources, I'm sure. Mike and I do a little reseller hosting for some people. It's been working out good for us. We have some space now that we can test projects in and everything else. We're renting it out to a few people. Everything's good. We know how the stuff works, so we have good support. We made sure that our reseller has good support, so if something in the data center side goes down, or if I'm unsure of how to change a feature or something, they're knowledgeable and they know what they're doing. So everything's great that way. But we have the work put in. We have the web agency already in place. We have a podcast already in place. We have all the rest of it already in place. There's a bunch of work behind that, and I feel as though I just kind of want to have a discussion. I know this is a web news, and I'm kind of going off, but I want to have a discussion on how it's not easy for these programs that would be seemingly easy to make money on, how it's not easy to make money on them, and how there is a big business put into them.
Yeah. So let me just. I think the big point is that everyone wants to get to that passive income or recurring income stage where they've created a bunch of products or they've created a bunch of services that don't need a lot of upkeep, and they're constantly being used to enough to the point where they're like living off of those services. So essentially you're like retired, you're very little upkeep, or you're paying someone to do the upkeep, and you are making enough money to live off of. I mean, in my eyes, that's the goal of passive income. Is that correct with you? Like, is that what you would want in passive income, where you don't actually have to do much to achieve that income at the end?
Literally the definition of passive income, but yes,
Okay.
like from a personal
Exactly.
note, yeah, absolutely.
So I think what's lost is the amount of time and effort and luck and just skill and stuff that has to go in to get to that stage. And the percent chance of it actually happening, even if you are really good at something, or if you have all that, or if you have the audience or whatever, like even the chance of it happening to the point where you can actually be completely passive or somewhat passive and still receive an income is low. And the amount of work put in is high. So even though the word is passive in there, it's very much a lot of work to get there. And we're at the stage where we're kind of getting there. Like we can see it happening. We have a few things that are actually passive, but it's all still very small. It's all still very much at the stage where it's definitely not supporting us. Most of our income is coming from very much active like services, design, website creation, editing, help. Like it's very much an active source of income still, even though we're very much trying to create a system where we do get that passive income, where we can just create content that people will enjoy and want to pay for or help support us with. But that's a very difficult task, as we found out. And it's really important for people that start getting into this to know that. Like you can't, in my mind, if you have a job right now, or if you don't have money saved up and you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to become a passive income expert, and I'm just going to make money passively without having a side job or anything. I'm just going to do this and I'm going to make money passively. I think that thought process probably won't work for you, like unless you get lucky and all that, or unless you're super talented in a specific skill or something like that. You have some sort of standout factor. What most likely needs to happen is you need to kind of slowly and gradually and effectively transition or supplement your regular active income with passive until to the point where you can reproduce a system that will generate you that passive income. So for instance, if we found out that after like 2 years of doing this, that all of it, that, making courses or making video guides is the way to the passive income, right? Through a lot of like trial and error and through a lot of research and through a lot of effort, we found that out, then we would start putting a lot more effort into that. And we would start churning that out and getting it up and more and more and more. And at that point, then we can start, going from active to passive and transitioning our time that way. But to be like, I'm going full passive right away, I just don't think that's a realistic mindset. And I think it's important to bring that up. So I think that there has to be that transitionary period. There has to be that in between. Like you need to generate your skills. You need to generate that idea or whatever you have. And you need to kind of give yourself some time without rushing into it. Like unless you're in a perfect situation where you don't have to pay for anything, there just isn't a way to get there without actually having a job or actually having that active like contractor income or whatever.
And the thing is too, like that's a good point. A good thing to note is, especially in the web development industry and just the web industry in general, the prospects of passive income are there, right? They're, it's ripe for the taking. If you're a person that knows how to make a really good podcast hosting website and podcast hosting service, and you build out that service, and then people start hosting, like effectively renting space from you and using your features for your distribution to other podcast services, and like you write guides and everything to help all these people, and maybe you have a monetization program for them and stuff like that. So you're just like a really your ears to the ground of the podcast world, and you're always updating and stuff like that. Then you do have passive income in that people like you're designing a product. The product is sitting there, whether it's now. Generally, it has to be marketed in some degree. So the product is sitting there, ripe for the taking. If we just ignore marketing for a moment, let's just say people are coming in from some source, from marketing of some source. So people are coming in. You're not working for them individually. And while you are maybe away for a day or two, people are still buying stuff. So the income itself is passive because people have recurring bills because they're hosting podcasts with you. They also have the initial payment if it's more for whatever reason. So like, they have the initial payment and then the recurring payments, however much those are. And those recurring payments will continue going until they cancel. But the thing is, what Mike is saying is the active time needs to be there. You needed to get that initial project out. And as a result of getting that initial project out, or in order, I should say, to get that initial project out, the initial project needs to be researched, have a good UX, have marketing, like I said, have all the bits and pieces to make you stand out from the competition, to have people want to come to your service and use it and then effectively pay for it. It's the same thing with a blog. There is passive income in the blogging space where, let's say you write over a year, or like let's say it's a half a year just to make it easier. So half a year goes by and you have 100 articles and you have tons of people coming in and reading all those articles. Absolutely, assuming your SEO is good and all the rest of it and your website stays up, for years to come you will have people coming to your website. But those numbers will peter down, especially if it's a news site, down to nothing or near zero or low unless you have an active role in writing new articles on whatever schedule works for your niche. That's the big thing, is the difference with passive income, and you can go and like take a much better advice from Pat Flynn than what we would give you because he's the passive income guy. Check out his podcast. But regardless, he even says working hard now so you can reap the benefit later. That's part of his podcast sort of byline or slogan or whatever you want to call it. And what that is you're putting in the work now to say build out that podcast service, and then there's still active work, like maybe every month or every 2 months you push out an update where you're like, oh, Amazon Music's now taking podcasts, I better put an article up about that, or I better put a feature in because of that or something. Whatever works for your particular niche. If you're a news site, you better have up-to-date news. You're not going to have up-to-date news if you write something from 2009. How out of date is a news article from 2009? Now, some stuff is more timeless. You can try to do that. But again, even with tech stuff, if you did a guide on Windows 7, sorry to say this, but Windows 7 is now no longer modern. So if someone comes around and sees your video or your embedded video in your blog post, and you're showing them how to set something up in Windows 7, is that more timeless? Yeah, because there's going to be tons of people even today on Windows 7. But there's a lot of people that are no longer on Windows 7. Could you imagine following a tutorial from somebody, even if what they're saying is up to date? Could you imagine doing a tutorial from somebody who's filming and clearly filming on Windows XP? I'm immediately, not really going to trust that thing because it's old. It's probably not going to be that great because back then, obviously, almost at home video, but I guess it'd be home like recording and microphones and stuff like that. Like the idea of the quote unquote creator wasn't really a thing back then. And so obviously you're suffering from the fact that the industry as a whole wasn't quite bumped up. So yes, you created a quote unquote timeless video, but it's time, for an update. And that updated video takes an active role. So the point is like, let's say, for example, Mike and I build up our passive income, so we're selling a bunch of hosting, and we're selling a bunch of maintenance plans and stuff like that, and then him and I both, so effectively our business closes for 2 weeks. We both just go on vacation, wherever the hell we're going, whether we're together or apart, doesn't matter, we're just gone for 2 weeks. We're no longer at the office, we don't have any communication. The passive part of those businesses is the fact that money, however little or however much, will continue to roll in, and the business appears and is actually still open despite us not being around. That's the key thing. But when we come back, I guarantee there's going to be a couple support requests or something or stuff like that where you need to have that active role. And that's the main problem. So I really wanted to bring attention to this, honestly, because I feel as though, especially in this sort of work from home age, this COVID age, whatever you want to call it, I really feel as though people are going to be looking, and I think we may have mentioned this before, looking for ways to make money online. And I honestly think, unless, and there's a million and one niches out there, so I could be wrong on a bunch of them, but for the most part, and the ones I can think of on the top of my head, you need to have an active role, especially at the beginning, for most, if not all, businesses that boast passive income. A prime example would be, there are people out there that drop ship, okay? And they think, oh, that's a great way to do like passive income, where you find a product on some website that generally will ship from China, let's say. So it'll ship from China, and it will ship, obviously, because it's directly from China, it's going to be cheaper. So let's say it's a watch. I don't know. I'm making something up. So it's a watch. Let's say the watch is $10 if you were to order it from China. So you go, oh, okay, well, this watch actually looks pretty good. Why don't we do some drop shipping, and why don't we sell it like as if it's, some really, really super cool watch. So we'll make up the marketing scheme. We'll take out the Instagram ads. We'll do all this other stuff, and we will take out all these ads for this watch. And when somebody orders from us, we'll just buy a watch and ship it to them. That's at a high level drop shipping. Now, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, and God knows whether it's legal everywhere, I don't know whether it is, but if you think about it, that is passive income, because now you have your store open and everything. But what did you have? You had a bunch of marketing knowledge that you had to apply. If you didn't have marketing knowledge, you had to learn the marketing knowledge and then apply it. You had to build out a website or a Shopify store, because there's various ways to do whatever. You had to learn, or already have learned, in which those hours are effectively invested, even if they were done on personal time. You have to learn or have learned social media skills, and you have to know what looks good. So you have to have a little bit of design knowledge, because you're not going to go out and hire a bunch of people to sell these $10 watches, because God knows how many people are going to buy it. And some people are super, super, super successful with drop shipping, and I'm sure it has its ups and downs and everything, and I'm not acquainted with drop shipping in any way, so I don't know really anything about it beyond what I said. So I'm sure there's an in-depth community out there, and if you have any comments, like, let us know. Maybe we can have you on the show if you're a big drop shipper, because it'd be an interesting thing to talk about web, or about what's going on the web. But the point is, there's a big active component. There's a reason why there's like drop shipping guides, and there's drop shipping webinars, and there's drop shipping videos, and drop shipping this, and drop shipping YouTube channels. I'm sure, I haven't checked, but I know for sure I've seen a couple webinars and stuff like that, because it is a job. Yes, if you start your drop shipping campaign, make the website, and then leave, and you just take off for a week, people are going to be buying that watch all week, assuming your ad campaigns are running for a week and your website's up. But you're not going to be able to sell that watch forever. You're going to have to go find another product, build another page, build another this, put another product for sale, figure stuff out, make sure there's enough stock, do this, do that, and like mess around. Maybe you're going to have to mess around with inventory, change the watch if it sells out and is not coming back into stock, whatever. And so to end the rant, there's a big active component to passive income that I feel as though people don't realize, but passive income is still possible. Passive income is still valuable, and passive income should absolutely be a part of whatever business you're trying to do, especially if it's online, because it's invaluable and because it will keep you afloat and fill in those gaps between, say, projects. Big payout because you did a project, now there's a lull, but now that during that lull, you're maybe learning something new. If you're a web dev, you're learning something new, but all your hosting fees are keeping you afloat. New project comes in. Now you're more skilled. And you can charge a little more, and then you go up there, up goes the curve for how much money you came in, and then down it goes again, but it doesn't hit bottom. It kind of like flattens out a little bit because you have that passive income. And it's possible, absolutely possible, that passive income will bring you tons and tons of money, and eventually you'll be like, what are you talking about? I never had an active role. Well, you set it up, didn't you? So you had an active role at some point. So that's just my two.
I don't think...
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think there's anyone that's earned a passive income that will say that they never had an active role. I think that mindset would only be from someone that hasn't done it yet, if that makes sense.
That's probably fair, yeah. Because people are gonna I've been doing a lot of social media lately, and you might just be like, oh, all I'm doing is posting on Facebook. Yeah, but it's a big job, because it's like, oh, these pictures gotta have their their all their aspect ratios changed. This has to be changed. We have to choose the right time. We have to make sure everything's passed or spread out. We got to make sure the captions are good, the hashtags are good. We got to move this and that and move this thing around and everything. And yes, it's not rocket science, and yes, it's not a highly technical job. And yes, if someone looked at it, they'd understand what I did. But have them come in and say that's not work. You know, what if I had problems with video uploading, so now I got to go and change the codec and everything else. Like, it is a lot of work to schedule stuff on social media. And that, in and of itself, is passive, because passively I haven't posted anything on social media for a week. I've had a bot do it. So, well, not a bot. I've had the official creator studio or whatever they call it, but regardless of which, that's the point. You know what I mean? Like, it is very much a job, and like people, and that is an active role that I invested a certain amount of time, scheduled enough posts for like a week-ish or something like that, and then those posts were passive. I never touched social media. Now I'm out, and I gotta touch it again and go back in as an active person. Go back, be active for 2-3 hours, something like that. Then I can go passive again for a week or however much I've scheduled.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I think it's important to know that there's a lot of effort behind it, and it's still, even the effort is not guaranteed to bring you anything, but it's also important to strive for it, because it is something that will improve your lifestyle, improve everything drastically if you can kind of master it.
Yes, that's the thing, is like, you and I got into passive income late, but if we had started earlier, then we probably would have had, you know, even more passive income, and that would have been even more money in between projects, or in between whatever, like, I don't know, in between pandemics these days. Who frickin' knows? I was going to try to say something specific, but 2020 is so damn crazy. Like, in between whatever, you know, whatever happens on this crazy planet, we have like a solidified income. And to be clear to people will slowly unsubscribe, especially if a product is unsupported. People will unsubscribe. And so the passive income needs that active role even to keep itself up in that regard. Membership sites need like new posts. Podcast apps need to like have new articles and new features put out. Maybe new UI update here and there. What's another good passive income source? Blogs, like I said, need to have new articles written, new blog posts written, new guides, whatever it is. YouTube channels need to be up. You see those influencers. There was a whole YouTube burnout thing that happened in 2019, I think, where they were talking about how everyone was getting burned out because they were friggin' pumping out videos for four plus years every single day. Some of them. What a crazy way to be. You wake up and it's like, all right, get the cameras out. Like, what's going on here? Like, are we on like the Kardashians like reality show? Like, what's going on here? And like, these people effectively were, you know, some of them. Crazy. So that's my 2 cents on recurring income, passive income, whatever you want to call it. I think we can run the old conclusion unless Mike has anything to add here.
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. Let's run her up.
Alrighty, well, remember we're on that Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Sean from Rabbitworks JavaScript, find him at youtube.com/RabbitWorksJavaScript. Garrick from Local Path Computing and Web Design, find him at localpathcomputing.com. Ryan Gatchell from Blue Black Digital, find him at blueblackdigital.com. Chris from Self-Made Web Designer, find him at selfmadewebdesigner.com. Tim from The Web Hacker, find him at thewebhacker.com. DL Ford from dlford.io. And Bib Hashdash from Twitter via @BibHashdash. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you're listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things Podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.